to the March 24th, 2026 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First order of business, accepting the minutes from January 25th, 2026. Any commentary? All right, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from January, you say 26th?
25th.
25th.
February 25th.
That's what sorry, from February 25th.
All right. Ms. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Testa?
Aye.
Ms. Craig Coman?
Aye.
Mr. Killalay?
Yes.
And I am a yes.
Did we have a second, or it doesn't matter?
Okay.
Frank will second.
Frank will second.
I was leaving it for Jim.
So kind of you.
He jumped the gun. I tried.
All right. Now on to the meat of the matter. So today we are joined by our board members, by our applicant, who will be introduced as we come. We also have David Gamble, our peer reviewer, who is online. Judy Barrett, our advisor. George Pucci, our advisor from KP Law, and observing with him is Emily Israel, also from KP Law. Welcome. And filling in for Terry, we have Andrew Shapira. Thank you very much. So today we're going to talk about architecture, talk about the design of this plan, its layout, and both the building and the landscape side. And without too much further ado, I'd love to bring the applicant back up, and we can get started. Please introduce yourselves for the record once again.
Good evening. My name is David Steinberg. I'm a principal from RCG LLC. I'm joined by Ed Bradford from the architectural team. And I believe Gian is online.
She is.
We also have Natalie
I am.
Adams. We also have the landscape architect online, and John Smolak, our attorney, here with us.
All right, welcome. So tell us a little bit about your vision here.
Happy to. So we actually have a presentation that we could walk through, and for this presentation, we have focused on the peer review.
Yeah.
As you noted, both architectural and landscape peer review. Start with the architecture, and we can go to Natalie on the landscape. So our presentation is structured just like the peer review is in two parts. In fact, the peer review included two components. Our presentation is set up the same way. There was a focus on the peer review about step backs in relationship of the proposed design to the neighborhood.
Yep.
And another focus in the peer review relating to materiality, really, exterior cladding materials. So I have a presentation to walk you through that.
Yeah, and I think we have it hooked up here so that it can
Yeah, and if I
go through.
can just provide a little context, we did meet with David Gamble at TAT's offices, and obviously we didn't get written comments back till sometime after that. So
Yep.
this was sort of, a week's worth of studies to try to address what we took away as the main points, as I point out in the presentation here, and sort of a basis for discussion and direction, I think.
Yeah, well, and to set my expectation, right, this is, the peer review alone is obviously not the end of feedback, right? Because we'll be having this discussion here, we'll be bringing in the community and their input, and then following that, we will likely have some kind of wrap-up later on, either standalone or as part of, combined with other things. So there will definitely be more opportunities for continued discussion and development on this. But thank you very much for working on that crunch schedule to bring us some answers so that we can talk through them.
And Andrew, can you bring up the TAT presentation?
Is this one right here?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thanks everyone. Again, Ed Bradford, principal at TAT. And as Dave noted, my colleague John Zeringer is been working closely with me and the team on the design. She's online as well. So as I said, the presentation is structured into these two components, as the peer review did. Focus first on the building step backs or relationship of the massing to the neighborhood, and then the second part related to materiality. So starting with the first topic, if you will, the peer review suggested that we look closely at step backs to better relate the form and the massing, heights, et cetera, to have a better relationship to the scale of the neighborhood. So this exhibit shows on the top a site plan or floor plan of the building, and what we've highlighted on that top exhibit is the portion that during our November 2025 presentation, we highlighted the portion of the building that we had proposed a step back. And the peer review noted that this was a strategy that was already incorporated into the design. We noted at that same hearing that the site works to our advantage as well, even before talking about step backs, because of course the site is a slope site. So as the site slopes away from the mills and towards the neighborhood, we do use that topography to our advantage to have the building form at the northern edge of the site closest to the neighborhood is 1 story lower than the part that is focused on the mill. So again, the top exhibit shows our proposed step backs, and then the lower exhibit shows, reading through the peer review, if you just stay with that for 1 minute, thank you. The lower exhibit there shows the same plan review, and what we've highlighted in that same color are additional areas of step backs. And those will show better in some of the renderings and some other exhibits in a moment. But you can see we really took an entirely different an approach where we expanded these step backs quite a bit.
Yeah.
So we looked not only at that edge right on to the northern portion of the building right along Prescott, but we looked at the wing that's south of that too. In other words, the whole frontage along Prescott, not just that one area. And then along the north in the relationship to 39 Prospect, the edge of the residential building as well as the garage. So that's what that graphic is showing there. And next slide, please. So, and now I have a series of sections to kind of walk you through what that means in terms of the section. So this shows the arrangement or a building section through the proposed or through the two wings of the residential building. This, in fact, is a section that we shared at the November meeting. On the left-hand side is the 5-story wing closest to the mills. We move through the courtyard, and then the wing cutting into the hill, if you will, shows that transition I just noted, going from 5 stories to 4 stories, again, taking advantage of that topography as we get closer to the abutter at 39 Prescott. So we noted just the changes in topography, again, work to our advantage. And your perspective from higher on the hill also reduces the perceived height of the building. But with the peer review input in mind, the next slide, please. You can see we took that elevation and proposed a step back along that frontage, if you will. So what we've highlighted there is the elevation of what would really be the roof of the 3rd story of the building at elevation 142 foot 8 inches. And just to show the relationship of the abutting home at 39 Prescott, the elevation of that roof is approximately 153 feet. So what we're trying to do here with these step backs is create the impression, as one views the building from grade, of a 3-story building, and then a 4-story that's stepped back and set behind, but reduced as far as your visual perception of it is from the vantage point of the neighboring property. And then the next slide, please. This exhibit we didn't present at the November hearing. We didn't bring a section through the garage and through this same abutting property at 39 Prospect. But this is the design that is included in the application and the one that we showed in November. So this again shows the advantage that the change in topography does give. Again, taller on the side towards the mills, reduced in height as you move up the hill and closer to the abutting property. So the impression in that design is of a 4-story garage adjacent to the home at 39 Prospect. Next slide, please. But again, with the idea of step backs in mind, I think the peer review may have been focused more on the residential building potentially, but the idea is a great one. So there's no reason that the same idea couldn't be applied to the garage. So that's what we're showing here, is pulling back the garage, basically pulling back or eliminating one row of parking spaces, if you will, along that frontage. Again, so the idea in this case would be to step back that upper level of the garage about 18 feet, the depth of a parking space, so that the perceived elevation from the vantage point of the neighboring property would be that of about a 2-story garage.
And what's the distance of the setback for that?
It varies along that frontage. The tightest point is 16'6",
Okay.
and then it increases depending on where you measure.
Right, no, sorry, I meant what's the like how far, the step back, how far backwards is it set
Yeah,
from?
18 feet.
18 feet,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Because I was gonna say, that for the garage at least looked like a straight line, right? That okay.
Yep, we've pulled the entire frontage of the garage back one depth of a parking space, which is 18 feet.
Gotcha.
And then the next slide, please. So, so together with the sections and the plan studies, we updated the rendering. So this is the view that we showed at the November 25th, November 2025 hearing, showing the perspective from Prescott. This is looking down the hill towards the building. 39 is just on the left, and of course the proposed building just beyond that. So here you can see the step back that we initially proposed, again, in the original application, stepping back that top floor, again, to give the impression of, from the vantage point at grade, of a 3-story building and that 4-story stepped back. And then the next slide. The peer review suggested potential additional step backs along this frontage. In fact, there's a sketch in David Gamble's peer review that is quite similar to this, where we step down the 3-story portion, one additional story, so 2 stories at that corner. Still have the setback on fronting on Prescott just above that, and then to the left of that whole frontage you can't see because it's behind 39, but we again reduce that 1 story, and then the garage an additional story. And then this view, it's a little hard to see, but as you move down, and as I showed in that graphic, also additional step backs in the wing just beyond. So you can see the brick mass that's kind of is the end of the building in this view. We stepped that down a story, and then the mass adjacent to that also a story. So again, reducing via step backs the original proposal by 1 story along this entire frontage. And the next slide, please. We also heard that there was some commentary about looking at different roof forms. So we did that. This is not something that was suggested in the peer review, but it's another way to deal, of course, with the massing and the architecture. So that's what we're showing here as another option. So the last one I should have noted, we called option A. This is option B. This would take that same wing. It would be, from the interior, it would be really the same assembly of units, but rather than the step back, we show a more traditional roof form that's more similar to the homes in the neighborhood. So this is another way to deal with massing and to deal with architecture that, at least roof forms that could be perceived as more complementary to the neighborhood. Please. Thanks. And then the second part, or the second...
Before we get started on that, I
Sure.
think this is a good time to just sort of break for commentary from the board at least. Does anyone from the board want to chime in with some thoughts?
Yeah, so the first drawing there that showed these step backs, is that along the back of the first floor? Is it the first floor or just the fourth floor in the back of the building?
The fourth floor, yeah, the top floor.
So the 1 through 3 stays the same?
Yes.
So the garage distance doesn't, this setback from the property line doesn't change, it's just the top level sets back from the building?
Correct.
Okay.
And what is looking just at the top floor, what is the distance from the closest point of that building to the 39 Prescott?
To the property line?
Yeah, to the property line, because it was 16 and a half before. What is that distance now?
It would remain 16 and a half.
Okay, because that corner is still the
Yeah,
closest spot.
we haven't adjusted the footprint of the building.
No, I mean
of the
just
levels.
looking at the top floor.
Okay.
Right, so in other words, like, from just that plane, what is the closest point?
That's a good question.
I mean, if
Well, I
it's
think it says an
16 plus
18-foot
18 is
additional setback, so the closest point at that level would be about
34.
34 and a half,
Well,
35.
but I'm not sure that that's true, right? Because for the garage, that's the case. But if you look at the unit just next to the garage, it looks
Oh.
like the fifth floor is still closer to the property line than that. So it might only be about like 18 or 19 feet from the property line still.
Do you have the top-down view with the setbacks?
I think
'Cause
if you
it was
know
the
what the
straight
step
line
back of
over.
the apartment is versus the
The
garage.
apartments are
Oh.
further back because the line's on an angle, right? So actually,
No,
it's the
right.
buildings,
Yeah, because it
y-
is.
y- your appendix might make more sense here. That wasn't included, but,
Yeah, it does look like the corner
Yeah, that
corner is like, it isn't exactly at the closest point, but it's close to the closest point of that corner.
Right.
So it's probably more like 20 feet rather than 16 feet,
Yeah.
is my guess.
So I apologize for, this is gonna sound like a stunt to be a little dramatic, but I brought a tape measure and I measured out what 16 and a half feet looks like, right? And 16 and a half feet is the distance from the edge of this table to the first row of seats that are behind you. So 20 feet is basically the next row of seats, right? And so it's still very close at that point, right? It is really kind of a pinch right there. And so, that's my biggest worry in looking at this. I appreciate that, I certainly appreciate, especially on the garage, having these step backs, because I think, in terms of cars and headlights and things like that and noise, having that extra little bit of distance will be useful, even though it doesn't affect the lower floors.
Right, okay, so, all right, I'm sorry, good.
Yeah, but the building itself, with all the units, isn't that much further back. It's not 34 feet, so yeah, it's like,
The building doesn't change, the footprint.
Right. No,
foundation
exactly,
doesn't
the foot-
change from
right.
the setback from the property line,
it-
it's just the top floor of
Yes.
the apartments and the top floor of the garage are set back.
Yes,
Right.
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a way to terrace it to
Right,
make it look
so it's
a little
more
less
of an
aggressive.
appearance than it is a setback issue.
Right,
Right.
yeah, it
Setback
doesn't,
stays the same,
it doesn't
just
change the
appears-
legal.
Doesn't appear to be as big.
Yep.
Maybe we can come up with a different word for step back. I think step back sounds too close to setback. It's gonna get confusing. But, I mean, I think that Mike's point is like it does make a good difference in appearance, but not overwhelming on that unit, that closest unit to the corner there. The garage is a big difference, but that closest unit to the corner is less of a big difference.
If I might additionally ask, what is, I think when David Gamble talked about step backs, another thing he mentioned is, of course, that that space can be used, right, in a way that maybe a roof can't. So what's the intention of the use for those spaces, right? Are they gonna be common space? Are they gonna be garden space? Like, is there a plan for what those step backs will become?
They certainly wouldn't be common space because all of them align with an interior apartment home.
Okay.
Just inside. As the peer review noted, it is a good opportunity to get an outdoor deck
Yeah.
for the folks that occupy that.
Well, and to your point, like the garage step back is not gonna have an apartment attached to it, right? And so I guess, maybe that's one opportunity to have a little bit of greenery as well, as a way to help disguise the building a little bit.
I think that'll still
I
be
don't
part of the
think that-
garage.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. I think
No?
you're just gonna take the top floor and take it back
Oh,
18
because
feet, so
because
you're
it's
gonna-
still, you still gotta park cars there. Yeah,
Right,
okay, so
so-
cars will still park on the edge of it, that makes
Right,
sense.
right.
Okay, yep.
So,
This is a slight change, but how many parking spots is that removing on the top? And does that put you in a pinch for parking spots elsewhere? I know the parking math was pretty confusing with all of the different units, but yeah.
Yeah. That one row is I think 9 spaces.
Okay. Oh,
Okay,
so
so
not that
9
many.
out of about 400, right? That was.
Okay.
Yeah, parking garage, I think, was 397 spaces. So, I think at this point, we're more concerned about finding what forms, we can work with to make a difference. I think we'll get our parking studies back, I think, in time for the next meeting. Got a little slowed down by the winter weather. So I think there are other ways to resolve if we have little shortfalls here or there, and make up, resolve the parking questions if we can.
I will say, I actually, looking at that picture, I do appreciate that corner having 2 floors cut away as well. I
Yeah.
think that actually really helps a lot.
Yeah, coming down Prescott.
Yeah, because I think it adds a bit of slope and a bit of depth to it that is very helpful.
Yeah, almost makes it look like different buildings.
Yeah.
I actually like the option B where it has a roof on it. to
The gable
transition-
and the-
Yeah, to transition to the neighborhood.
I wasn't clear
need-
how
I
that
need
would
to
help
see-
you
yeah.
keep the same number of units, because then all the top floor units would have the,
Yeah,
I mean, I
there's-
grew up in a Cape house with a
Well,
half second floor, so.
if you look at the picture, right, so
Can you go
maybe we
back to
can
the
switch
other-
the next picture. So and I think this is one of the things that I would be interested in community feedback on, is that the consequence of having it is that you do the same area loss as the step back, but you don't actually really get the floor loss.
I see,
Right, so
yeah.
it ends up being taller.
Right,
And so I look at them, and I actually prefer option A because I think it cuts away more from the building as you go to the street.
yeah.
But again, I would be interested in the community feedback for that because certainly from my perspective, like, they're the ones who are gonna be near it, and
Right.
whichever one they prefer, I'm more inclined to support, but.
And option
think
B,
we're-
to be clear, doesn't do any redesign on the part of the building that's closer towards the garage, right? That's just fronting along.
Well, I think it's more a transition from the neighborhood into the.
Right, no, but I'm
into the
saying, like, this
village.
picture, this rendering, like, from the perspective of the back of 39 Prescott, the building kind of looks the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we did assume the same step back in both schemes.
yeah, okay,
Well, I think we need to see it across like that full elevation, because the way it looks here, it almost looks like a separate building, but when it's attached to the rest, I think you might have a lot of different shapes, and I don't know how
Yeah.
compatible those different shapes are on the building
A
when you
little
look
bit
at
of
it as a whole.
whiplash, yeah.
yeah.
So we have to see more of that to really get a sense of
I think this was
how
a
it would look.
quick brainstorm
Yeah.
type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we choose a design direction, the architects can then resolve that,
Right.
into the rest of the building.
The architectural peer review had also commented on screening mechanical equipment. Where are the condensers and whatnot going to be placed?
Yeah, so the condensing units will be located towards the interior of the roof, so they're generally located above the corridor, if you will, towards the center of the building. And they're relatively low, they're the top, even sitting on a stand to get out of the snow, the top of the unit is just about 5 feet tall, even a little bit under that. So by the time.
Every unit has its own condenser, right?
That's right, yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of them.
what I'm getting at is we have a parapet wall at the edge of the building. The condenser units are screened visually from the street, so mechanical equipment is not a visual concern with the design.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure on what you had for a parapet. I guess we can see it a little bit in this one. Yeah, so how high is the parapet? I guess these elevations are the only, or these sections, the only ones you can see a bit of a parapet.
Right, yeah, we would be at 42 inches. That looks like it's a little bit lower, but we'd be adjusting that parapet.
Okay. So, that doesn't provide any acoustic screening, though, with all those units running, that could be kind of loud in the area.
Yeah, it does provide some, a bit, but
Yeah.
sure.
But compared to a more typical screen wall that you might put up, you see them in more commercial buildings
Right,
for larger rooftop equipment, but some of those also have acoustic ratings to them.
yeah, sure.
And I think that could be important in this area.
Yeah, this
At
type
at
of
least on the
system.
side facing the residential
Yeah,
neighborhood.
it is something we will certainly study further. Although for this building type and these mechanical systems, even with these setbacks that we're talking about, it's not it hasn't been a concern. When you're talking about a screen wall more for like a central plant or something like that for a commercial building, then it's a bigger issue when you have one central.
Yeah, but you're gonna have a lot of them, though,
There's
since you have one for each
yeah.
unit, so.
I was gonna say, I don't know how hard of an ask this is, so you should tell me. Is there an easy way to model what the noise would be from the street level, from those condensers running full blast? In other words, like if they're all running, what's the actual noise output likely to be? Just because I think that helps set that expectation, right?
There are acoustic engineers who do that, so.
I understand, and I don't want it to turn into like a multi-$1,000 operation. But if it's like, hey, I just need to punch some numbers and do a square, Gauss's law measurement from distance, then that might be, like a rough estimate might be helpful there to address whether or not, more soundproofing would be helpful.
Yeah, that's something we can dig into a little bit more.
Okay.
Or if, I don't know, if the other developments down there have similar rooftops, you could maybe actually go out there and measure it in real
They do.
place.
Yeah.
Except you have all the other noises contributing to it. so
And right now,
yeah.
it's not the warmest to really push the systems.
Yeah, but if are they gonna be using heat pumps for it? So they're running for the heat as well.
I'm not so sure. I'm worried about this ground noise as much as, the people in that house.
Bedroom noises and.
Right,
Yeah.
2 levels up. Right, might be a little bit more
Direct path.
direct than ground level noise,
Yeah, or even like in their backyard, could be
Yeah.
like,
so.
Well, this would be a noise from the roof level, not from the ground level. They're putting them all on the roof.
yeah.
No, I know, but he was saying about the noise
Oh,
level.
I got
line
you, I'm
of
sorry.
sight From the roof.
From the
to-
listener,
Yeah.
not from the,
Yeah.
not from the source, okay.
All right. Ms. Rutherford, Ms. Jacobs, do you have any questions or thoughts?
I am taking it all in.
I too am taking it all in. I definitely want the community's feedback on the proposed revision options. I do agree that B does look like it fits into the neighborhood better from the way it's presented. And I am very excited to hear about the very landscaping details with regard to trees and other such, which may absorb some of that sound that we're discussing as well. So I'm taking it all in. Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts? Board?
I think we kind of skipped through it, but you had mentioned asking about what the uses for the step back there would be, and we were talking about some terraces that people might access. So it doesn't necessarily help with a perception of being perceived, if that makes it clear. Like
Yep.
for the abutters and the people walking down the street, there still might be people right up until the edge of that 16-foot setback.
Yep.
You know, even with this step back.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my point of view on this is that I think it's a visual improvement, and I think certainly at that corner, it's actually a pretty substantial one with the 2 levels. I am still worried about that one unit that is closest to the property, right? That I still think that gets very close. If that, you know, looks like maybe 20 feet or less from the property line, and that's still very close at that top level. Obviously, it doesn't change the total setback for the building at all, but I think that staging does help. And so if we can, if it's possible to maybe cut a little bit more into there, I understand that you have done your best to try to incorporate these step backs without getting rid of units altogether. And it's a tightrope to walk. So I appreciate what, you know, you've tried to be as generous as possible without breaking your model. And that's just, I think, the one place where I would put still a little bit of pressure on. But again, I'm interested in community feedback of what, you know, how they feel about these changes, and certainly option A versus option B. All right, so let's move on to the next piece.
There's another component to the architectural presentation. I could hit
Material.
first.
Okay.
So the second part to the David Gamble's peer review related to materiality. So that this is the part that we focused on here for this aspect of the presentation. So this exhibit shows in the upper portion a diagram that we pulled directly from the peer review report, and that shows an organization of materials, exterior cladding materials, as they're represented along the various frontages. And it actually aligns extremely well with our initial concept that is in our application, and we presented at prior hearing. The primary adjustment is really thinking about important aspects, important facades of the building, primarily the one focused on the mills. In our application and design presentation from November, and it'll show in a rendering in a moment, but we did focus brick on the ends and at important entrances, and then in between we had a different cladding material. The peer review suggests we provide a more continuous approach to that, fronting on the mills, and then it also notes that there can be a secondary material, more residential in nature, also consistent with our original approach, at those green end caps, you know, that again addresses the street, and that's the rendering that we just spent some time reviewing together. So the diagram on the bottom shows the adjustment we made, and we are proposing a more contiguous frontage of brick along the aspect facing the mills, and that's probably best shown on the next slide, please. So this shows the design that we showed in November. Again, the approach as we described here, and I just noted, was pretty strong approach to the end caps, primarily in brick, and then again calling attention or focus to the entries. So again, kind of 4 masses, if you will, of brick, but then looking to break down the mass of the building with different materials in between those brick sections. And then the next slide. This shows our approach in response to the peer review. So what we have proposed here is definitely a more contiguous brick facade that we agree is more complementary to the mills. Again, from this frontage, we think it's appropriate to have a different aspect to the residential street. But towards the mills, we do agree with this approach, and that's what we're proposing here. So again, taller brick sections at the important end caps and entries, a continuous 3-story base of brick that would connect those higher points. And it was also suggested in the peer review that we look at the garage as well and the material cladding on the garage. And it is, even in the type of garage we're proposing, likely a precast garage, it is possible to clad what are those spandrel panels in brick, again, preventing a more kind of, again, continuous frontage of brick. And then the next slide, we're moving a little bit closer here, starting again with our designer application in the November meeting. I don't think we showed this exact image in November, but we've moved a little bit closer up the entry drive. We're now approaching the primary entry to the amenities and the leasing space, but the same approach to massing and materials that I just noted, focusing on the entry with brick and then a more residential texture to the left of that. And then the final slide shows the adjustment. So again, as one experiences this is pretty much from eye level. As you approach the building, the focus certainly is on a brick 3-story base that provides that continuity really from east to west along this facade. And then more recessed above is the 4th and 5th floors from this vantage point.
I got a quick one. Those orange squares on the 5th floor, are those like railings in front of doors?
Yeah,
Sliders?
yeah, that's the thinking, yeah, so kind of Juliet balcony, if you will.
Okay.
I actually like this material change more than or it makes more of an impact than I even thought it would.
I had the same thought.
Yeah.
I think it looks a lot more like a mill building, right?
Right.
It's obviously not a mill building, right? Like it's still a modern design, but it feels more like a mill building than what we've had, than what you had before. So, yeah.
So what's the material in the 4th and 5th floors?
That would be a fiber cement clapboard.
And how about the windows?
The window material.
Yeah,
Um,
like on the upper floors and the lower floors?
Yeah, it's to be determined probably, but likely a vinyl window, could be a fiberglass window, something we would be exploring, but something that's
Right.
energy efficient. And
Yeah, and the brick, it seems like you'd want to have,
Aluminum.
a vinyl or that sort of thing. I don't know, that looks right, set in the brick versus aluminum frame, storefront type material.
yeah, the window materials are something we will definitely study. Aluminum does become challenging with the new energy codes and the like.
I was going to say, you've also sort of inset the windows sort of inside another material, right? Like you've got kind of a frame of brick around it in a way. But, okay.
That's right.
And that's like wood framing, I would assume.
The intent is to have a wood look appearance, yeah, so that look with a fiber cement product, hardy type product set. But with a kind of wood aesthetic is the idea.
So the other windows might work with that.
Do you have renderings of any of the other elevations with different material proposals, or are we gonna wait till we get a more firm idea of what the outlines are gonna be?
Yeah, I think the latter. As Dave noted, I think we're to sort of get the sense of folks here, and we can go from there.
Sure.
Ms. Jacobs, Ms. Rutherford, any thoughts on your end?
Not yet. I'm listening to the questions, listening to the answers.
All right.
I don't have anything to add to this part of the conversation.
Okay. All right. All right, well then,
So,
oh, yeah. We're gonna move on to the landscape.
yeah, so before the landscaping,
Yeah.
I think we might have asked this at one of the earlier meetings, but, so the garage, the back of the garage that is facing 39 Prescott Street, can you do any screening there to cut down on headlights
Oh.
from shining into that?
I think you already asked that at the beginning of the.
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
just-
it's gonna be a half wall like the front.
Yeah,
Which,
That's-
especially
that's-
coming up the ramp and whatnot, if there's nobody parked along that edge, might not really screen that much. Is that what you're thinking?
yeah, I know, I just, I've been involved in some projects where we did a little bit more, but it's a challenge
What
because
would
if,
more look like?
there's a variety of ways. Some, will, had it hung off the building a little bit and sort of, some sort of slat wall type thing, but,
So eating more into that setback, that's only 16 feet.
yeah, well,
Or
Not
external.
really, not really, because you're not gonna do it on the top floor, you'd only do it on the bottom 4 floors, because you'd have no top floor
Right.
to do it at, but,
but it, that affects your, ventilation there, and, if it impedes your airflow, that creates another challenge.
That is
You'd
the
ha- You'd
challenge,
have to
yeah.
put ventilation in there versus open air,
That's right.
which is just money, yours and not ours, so. I wouldn't think you'd have to do it on the south side.
Yeah, definitely not on the
But,
south side, because that's all industrial and commercial.
And maybe it could be limited,
Like to that
where the
corner.
car, yeah, it might not have to go across the whole face of it, but where the traffic would be aligned up with,
The landscape
With that,
conversation
yeah.
might also
Mhm.
relate to some of this. If they
On the
can-
lower floors, but at the top floors, it's gonna be tough.
Well, if they can, I wouldn't see
the
yet if
leaves
they
fall in
can.
the winter, so it's.
That's true, yep, deciduous trees, yeah.
All right, anyways, that was just,
Yeah,
I-
no,
I-
that's a worthwhile
I
thought.
know I had mentioned it before, but I was a little fuzzy on the answer. So,
Yeah, we're happy to study, get you a better answer and study that a little more carefully.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and also maybe it makes, it's relevant to which side of the garage the ramp is on, right? Because if it's the one that's further away going up, maybe that helps too.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the landscape side.
Great, that's me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Adams.
Hi there.
Hi, everyone. This is my first time presenting this project in front of the board, so we're very excited to be here and to present this to you. This project weaves together new landscaped open spaces, pedestrian pathways to strengthen campus connectivity and encourage exploration. Buildings 1 and 2 are anchored by lush courtyards that serve as dynamic social hubs, spaces for gathering, play, relaxation, comfortable seating, shaded retreats, and flexible furniture create an environment that seamlessly transitions from quiet respite to active engagement. These courtyards extend the life of interior spaces outward, complementing the resident lounge and fitness center with welcoming outdoor rooms that foster community and connection. The planting design celebrates the regional landscape through native drought-tolerant species chosen for their resilience, texture, and seasonal interest. This ecologically driven approach enhances biodiversity, conserves water, and ensures a landscape that matures gracefully over time, alive with color, movement, and a strong sense of place. Revisions encouraged by our peer reviewers, the landscape plan has been updated to preserve additional existing trees along the 39 Prescott abutter, reducing the visual impact of the project. Additional canopy trees have been added to the rear of the building to strengthen the landscape presence. The site entry sequence has been formalized by an enhanced tree canopy to create a more welcoming approach. One of the primary site constraints is the electric easement that runs through the property. This condition has been leveraged as a design opportunity by introducing a grove of trees between the easement and Building 1, creating both spatial separation and visual buffering. Additional tree canopy has been incorporated along the lower edge of the swale adjacent to the parking area. The swale will be planted with native water-tolerant species that are resilient to both periodic inundation and extended periods of dry conditions. Located at the base of a steep slope beneath the electric easement, the swale is further stabilized with stoloniferous plantless shrubs. These plants will help erosion control, improve stormwater infiltration, and reinforce the ecological performance of the landscape. And now, could we move on to slide 2, please? This slide captures our landscape materials, and I just wanted to run through it with you in case you had any questions. Starting with the upper left, we have the play yard. This is play elements for tots and the 5 through 12 set. And we're having it on a synthetic lawn, which is cushioned to make it safe, the safety surfacing fall resilient. And then the planting strategy I just reviewed with you, but there's some captured some nice images of some native plants. And the planting will be loose and informal trees, shrubs, and perennials. And then moving down to the courtyard amenity, hardscape materials will be concrete with a dynamic scoring, very modern, and we'll use boulders for ballards, for design elements. Then moving on to the fences, we have a metal picket fence. We also have a black vinyl chain link fence where it's noted on the plan. And our walls are ready rock block walls. And on the lower left is, you'll notice the buffering materials, and you can go there. Down there we have a chart where the height at installation and then their growth height in the first 5-7 years, they grow pretty quickly. And moving on to the next plan is lighting plan. Oh, next page, there you go. This plan I had sent out to our lighting consultant, but and it came back, it looked great. I looked at it, put it in the presentation. I just noticed there's some light trespass on the right of the drive. So we're gonna send that back and have them, it's not a big deal. They can just put a shield on some lights and you won't get any light trespass. They know better. They were moving quickly, I guess. And we'll move on to the next page. This is, we were encouraged to do this by our peer reviewer. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful page for us to speak to. I call it Campus Connections. Pedestrian walkways flow naturally through the site, guiding residents and visitors toward other campus amenities and the adjacent neighborhood and into downtown while maintaining accessibility and visual continuity. And the yellow stars represent our building entries. And the pink dotted line, of course, is the pedestrian flow. And the blue rectangle is your wonderful courtyard with views of Osgood Pond. And thank you again. We're very excited to be part of this project. That finishes my presentation. I can take questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is going to sound like a very nitpicky thing, but I swear I have a point on it. If we go back to the first slide in this presentation.
Okay.
If I were to pick the point on this map that I would most want a tree, like if I had to pick one tree, right, it would probably be at this corner right here. And there's a little bit of a gap there. Now I understand there's some, specifics to the topography there, but can you help us understand a little bit why that one spot in particular has a gap?
No, I can put another tree there tomorrow. I'll put another tree there.
Okay.
I do think, so like, from the perspective of trees, if you're gonna put a tree within 16 feet of a building, it's not going to end up being like a
Healthy tree.
100-foot white pine. It's gonna end up being like a smaller tree that can be more easily maintained to not damage the building. So I mean, and I do think that one line of sight to the house anyway is at least blocked by the neighbor's garage, I believe.
Okay.
It's not on this schematic, but to me, I would have a hard time seeing a tree with only 16 feet of root space growing to be like a significant visual
Sure.
impact.
True, yeah, thank you, yep.
Have you had any discussion with those neighbors to see if they might be okay with you putting some trees on their property?
I have not, but it's an interesting point, and I'm sure we can bring it up with the project team and move forward with that.
That would
Yeah,
also be
I-
starting at a higher topography, so it
Yeah,
would
but they
take
might be totally opposed to it, takes
Yeah.
up some of their yard and whatnot, so I'm not,
Yeah, I think a
but,
tree,
but they might.
It's
they
worth a
might-
question,
They might
yeah.
welcome, I have no idea, so.
yeah, I think a tree on that corner just makes it even tighter. Appeared to be tighter,
Okay.
right? So-
No, it may not be wise. I just, like, it just stuck out to me as like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
gap, and I was like, okay, why do we have that gap?
Yeah.
But no, that's fair. It may not be the right decision.
Well, we certainly have some smaller, we have a fastigiate white pine we could put in there, we have arborvitae, you know, we could layer it up nice. And I think layers within, you know, speaking with the abutter, another layer of trees, if they wanted it, we could do that. If they wanted, you know, a huge sugar maple back there, if they had room for that, we could accommodate that, I'm sure.
So this red arrow, that's like a walking type of path? Is
That's
that
on the
The
on
fourth.
the last,
fourth line.
Yeah.
that goes around the pond?
That slide captures pedestrian walkways around the campus and up into our site and then downtown. And we're following crosswalks. We're not just going willy-nilly, you know,
Right, right.
here and there. We're following an actual, you know, a pedestrian movement. Like up to our site, you can't really tell on this plan because it's so far away, but we have a ramp system we'll be bringing in so that, you know, it's true. It will be an ADA accessible path, you know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of if they had older kids going to the high school, I'm not sure they're gonna walk by Avalon to get to that path to Walker Road. I'm thinking they're gonna cut,
Go up, Prescott.
no, I think they're gonna cut across, you know, into these apartment buildings that are behind McDonald's.
Wasn't there a fence there between that whole? No. There's not?
No, there's a fence along the property line of the Walker Road.
That's what I thought.
Meadowview condominiums. Yeah, the high school kids come through now the opposite way, through on the path, typically through our parking lots.
Through this
So
path.
we're showing sort of the reverse way from this building.
Right.
So they come, just like what is shown here, they come down the road towards the Walker Apartments, but then
Right.
cut off.
And it's also not, this isn't reflecting the topography, right? So you're going uphill into Walker Road, and then
Yeah.
there's actually like a mounding where the two properties meet and some fencing there. So we don't get, when
Well,
I
I'm
first got here, there's a lot of cutting through back there. There's not so much now,
Yeah.
especially since we established the mills.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there are kids that are living in the apartments or the proposed apartments, if they're gonna walk all the way down to Avalon and around to get onto Walker Road, if they're gonna try to jump the fence or cut across into those apartment buildings, that's all. That would be the easiest path for them, but.
I mean, if there's any vegetation left along that, at least when I went to look at it the way it is now, it would be a significant struggle to cut through this sort of scrubby vegetation, jump a 6-foot fence and cut. To me, it wouldn't be worth it, and I was a kid who climbed trees a lot, so, I mean, I don't know. So this doesn't show a difference in trees that are maintained that are there now. It sort of shows the same tree line on the original proposal. Is there any additional mature tree capture in this that is not shown on the design necessarily?
We work in adjacent with the civil engineer and the architect. So with the civil engineer has to bring the water around that back part of the building. So there's a certain amount of disturbance to the line in the rear. And I can take a closer look at it tomorrow. We try, so whatever we can save, we're going to save. But there's a certain amount of land that the civil engineer needs to create a swale so that they can capture the water from the building, right? So we will work within that, and then of course plant up the amend, mitigate, whatever word you want to use to, have more trees, more canopy. That's what's going to save the earth. So we want to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I probably didn't update that line, but I'm not sure. I'll take a closer look at it tomorrow. And for our next April submission, we'll tighten that up for you. Absolutely.
The two areas that I could see, and I don't have all the utility drawings, obviously, but I could see potential on the ends, basically, the side closest to Prescott Street itself, and the side closest to the Walker Apartments.
Okay, yeah,
Unfortunately, that pinch point doesn't
Prescott,
look like-
yeah, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that pinch point with the 16-foot setback, it's hard to see what could happen. Maybe some more terracing with the wall, because that's still gonna be a retaining wall, right? Up against the property line?
No, we removed, so on the property line against 39 Prescott, we removed the path and the retaining wall that was up against that, so we gave us some more flexibility in the grading there, and actually some more opportunities to preserve some of the more mature trees there.
Okay.
So trying to give more buffer there. I think Natalie's plan is slightly different colored, but she shows more trees
Along
off that
side.
first layer on the property line. You can see some larger,
And maybe
more like
those trees could
teal-colored
be
trees.
planted kind of at a higher elevation, so that even though they're 10 feet tall when they start, they have a little bit more
yeah, and I
height.
think there's a good chance we'll be able to preserve more trees there than we thought we could originally, and if we can't preserve them, we can plant bigger trees.
Okay.
That'll provide more of a buffer.
I would definitely be interested to see a sort of more specific look at what can be saved and what can be put there.
At Prescott and at the townhouse abutter, is that what you're talking about, those two conditions?
Yeah, the places where the clearing, at least in the original drawings, and then this kind of goes all the way back to the property lines where there are residents on the other side.
Sure,
And
okay.
I'm fairly certain, and I think we talked about this in the first meeting, that there are no mature trees on 39 Prescott. I think all of the mature trees along that edge are on this lot, I believe.
That's right, yes, you're right, yes, we have them, yeah. But since we're not putting that walk up there, the connection, we're retaining them now. They're the mint-colored trees, are the existing trees on the plan, are this mint-colored.
Oh, the ones closest to Prescott, the 4 trees right
Yes,
there?
yeah, there's 4 trees right there, those are.
Those are
yeah.
existing trees.
Yeah,
Oh,
those are
okay.
existing,
That's good to know.
yeah. But I'll look at the other points that you mentioned and make sure that we're addressing them correctly to reflect, and, maybe encouraging the civil to tighten up his grading lines if he can.
All right, any other thoughts or questions on the landscape?
So, so Gamble Associates hasn't, they're just seeing this now, right? So they don't really have,
No, they had a peer review as part of it. as
no, but
well.
I mean, they're just seeing this,
Oh,
the
this
response.
Oh.
Yes, yes.
So we don't know how they,
Well, he's online.
Yeah.
And he'll chime in with
Okay.
his thoughts, but,
yeah, okay, so we'll get that,
Yep.
okay,
yep, that's the next step after we finish here.
okay. Well, I was also gonna comment on the renderings from Prescott Street. Because we got an email today with some actual pictures of Prescott Street and the sidewalk, so
Yeah.
this seems like quite an improvement. Doesn't mean you're gonna improve Prescott Street.
I don't think it does.
If it was drawn like this,
But that's DPW's responsibility ultimately, right?
well. We often have off-site improvements done.
I assume
So-
that has not been proposed by you guys. That you'll be
Right,
making.
they're referring to the sidewalks that are shown on the image. No, we weren't
And the street-
proposing doing
and the
offsite
street without
improvements.
potholes in it.
Oh, yeah. with this street, but I think, you know, that there are conversations that could be had. We talked about stormwater management and, you know, there's a challenge in this property as we know, each layer of these things that adds cost to the project has to be resolved in some way.
Yep.
To maintain its feasibility. So we were not planning on, contributing to a public works project that would go up Prescott Street, which would be, I think, to make it continuous all the way up would be a pretty massive project, actually. And John and Andrew might be able to speak more to what the opportunities might be, because supporting housing production like this gives you a lot more opportunities to get things like state money to help support infrastructure improvements.
We are, I believe we are actually a preferred community in that regard already. But yes, because of our status with the master plan. All right. Ms. Rutherford, Ms. Jacobs? Guys all set?
I am all set at this time.
No questions.
All right. All right, well, I don't, you guys are all set, right? That was the completion of your, okay. So I think with that, we'll bring on David Gamble. Mr. Gamble, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great. So I know this is, really your first chance to get an in-depth look at this presentation. I handed it to you about an hour ago, but that's about where we are. So what are your thoughts on what
Sure.
you've seen so far?
Sure. So, David Gamble, I'm principal of Gamble Associates. We're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Thank you for allowing me to zoom in from a distance. I'm actually in Chicago at the moment. As you know, this is a very big building. It's also in a neighborhood of very big buildings. So the notion that setting something back, stepping back something, 8 feet, 18 feet, seems like not very much of a sacrifice. But in actuality, as one perceives it, and as shown in the renderings, it actually does make a visual difference. So the plan of the building is almost exquisitely efficient, hiding something that is usually very present in a project of this scale, which is the parking structure. And the team, the developer, has, I think, wisely turned it in such a way that diminishes its presence, and in fact sacrifices units probably by having the building go up against it. Now, the materiality was kind of a notion that, and I write a lot of design guidelines, and I'm working on a white paper about the unintended consequences of design guidelines. Because one that's often deployed is breaking up the building massing. I mean, I myself have written that many times. The unintended consequence of that is it might actually make something look more chaotic than if you don't try to break it up. So I appreciate the modest step back. So again, a setback is the distance a building is set back from a property line. A step back, as the one member mentioned, is the distance it's set back on an upper level. That actually does make a big difference. And it seems like they're just nipping and tucking on the edges, but nevertheless, it does make a difference. And even the notion that the continuous brick band along what I would consider the primary facade, that does actually change the reading of that as a big project. I think it makes it less big by making it more continuous in its materiality and in its coloration. So I'm a little agnostic about the version A or version B. I know the team didn't have a lot of time to chase that through, but either of them are better, frankly, than what was there before. Version A actually stylistically might be more consistent with the rest of the building, but as the ZBA member mentioned, option B pulls in the vernacular of the abutter. So I think either one could work. I might even suggest an option B prime or an option C, where you could imagine a pediment roof, but the top level of that is stepped back 6 or 8 feet for an outdoor terrace, which would provide some shade and shadow. I guess it's facing north, not a lot of shade or shadow, but it would provide some depth on that elevation. It's worth mentioning that the benefits of a development of this size tend to be general and diffuse. I mean, who would argue that adding more housing in a desirable community is a bad thing? But the impacts tend to be local and specific. So I've heard number 39 Prescott mentioned half a dozen times, and I think there's a lot of deferring to one particular abutter. However, I do think the team is trying to reconcile that both spatially and in terms of architectural expression. So it seems like a genuine effort to kind of cater, frankly, to an abutter that feels that they are, well, impacted more by a project of this scale. So what I'm saying is the strategies that the team is using, either one seems to try to ameliorate whatever impact is perceived in terms of scale. In terms of the landscape, and Natalie, I don't know if you can bring up that drawing, but I'm particularly curious about the translation of that dashed magenta line to the site plan that preceded it, which suggests it's asphalt, and whether or not this is not a campus. It's not a corporate campus. It's not an academic campus. It's not a medical campus, but the building does create some spatial definition with the Avalon and the other buildings. So I would like to see a way in which this magenta dash line is actually interpreted in the ground plane, probably with a material differentiation that incentivizes or actually clarifies the idea that a person can go from the entrance of the building out to this great landscape and the walk around the pond.
So David, just for that, you're talking about something like what they do for the Freedom Trail in Boston, right? Where they like lay a brick line in the pathway so that you know which one is the way to go, right? It wouldn't have to be brick, but something along those lines.
That might be overstating it.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do think that there needs to be, or there should be, a way in the ground plane. I don't think it's a single red brick. I think it's a pattern that would signal to people that are driving here, which is the vast majority of people, that you need to slow down because there is a path, desire line, as we like to say, leading pedestrians or cyclists from one destination to another. So I appreciate this drawing, but if you go back to the first one in the sequence, I don't see a translation of this diagram into the character of that walkway. And I feel like you should try a little harder and it might just be a ground plane texture. There's even like patterns that can be stamped onto the surface that might communicate that this is a place for people to walk as much as it is to drive. So in summary, stepping back a little bit on the north side makes a difference. Reducing the number of materials on the primary facade and addressing the corners in a way that's more sympathetic to the residential abutters is an appropriate notion. And certainly adding more landscape seems like a design trick, but as the landscape matures, it will certainly have a visual buffer to the architecture. And even though Ed and his team made the landscape look like you could see through it, over time, that will become more defined by the natural environment, and that's a good thing. It has all kinds of performative benefits to the project and actually to the site in its entirety. So I feel they've made good progress on a short amount of time.
Okay. So you feel that the plan modifications that they've proposed are responsive to your suggestions?
I do.
Any questions for Mr. Gamble?
I'm good.
Well, you made the comment that it's a big building, but it's in a neighborhood with big buildings, but it's really sort of at an interface of two neighborhoods, one of the neighborhoods with small buildings. And it's closer to those than it is to the to the other big buildings as part of the mill complex. So I don't know if there's any more that can be done beyond just the step backs to sort of soften that interface there.
Especially because I know, David, you're not in the room with us, but when Michael was talking about getting the tape measure out and measuring 16 feet, that's a really close setback.
Yeah.
But you're right. David commented that we keep talking about 39 Prescott, but, those houses that are directly across the street from it, I guess it's the northwest
Right.
face of the building. They're equally,
Significant shifts.
impacted, significantly. So, and they did add the step backs there, so, I don't know, I'm just, I guess I heard the focus of, this is a big building, where are there other big buildings, and it's appropriate, but I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more to ease the transition for those other houses that are in the
Yeah.
portion of the neighborhood
that-
that's smaller in scale.
That's a fair statement, and I don't want to oversimplify the site plan. It's really a building in transition, as you suggest, between a much smaller scale residential area and a former industrial area that had a very different scale. Having said that, height isn't always the best predictor of quality. And I think the public tends to overstate the importance of height when it's really, what's the experience from the ground? What is the material quality of the building? What's the public realm interface, we like to say in urban design? So unfortunately, and you probably don't want to hear this, there aren't too many other strategies other than continuing to erode or step back the building further and further. And it does add terraces or balconies to those units, but the unintended consequences of that is now you have someone that's out on their terrace at 2 a.m. smoking a cigarette, and the abutter smells it. So there's a kind of a trade-off there, and you want to be a little careful about how much public space is negotiating the relationship to the abutters.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment that the benefits are diffuse and the costs are specific, right? And that is, in my view,
The
why
impact.
we've...
Yeah, the impacts.
Yeah, the impacts, yeah. The impacts are specific, that, and that's why we have focused on what is really like a half a dozen buildings that are, houses that are close to this building, because they are the ones who sort of bear a lot of the impact compared to the rest of the community. And that is, we as a community are in some sense asking a bit of them to make that happen, right? And so my desire is to try, why I keep pushing, particularly on 39, is that I want to soften that impact as much as we can. I appreciate on some level that this structure has to remain viable for you, and that certainly, especially for 40B, that is very difficult math. I've had people tell me that they don't get involved in 40B at all because it is just very hard to make the math work, right? So I have certainly appreciate that side of it.
And I appreciated what David said about the quality of materials making a difference. If we pinch the math too hard, then
that can't
it
happen
has to
either.
go somewhere. So,
Right.
yeah.
And so, I understand we're walking a tightrope here, right? But I keep coming back to that one house because they are absorbing much of the impact for our whole community. And so I want to treat that with the respect that I feel it deserves.
Well, I guess a question that I would have further is, You got the play area in this courtyard, right across the street from a house on Prescott Street. Is that a, I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a sort of a landscaped area, but,
For noise or for?
yeah,
you know?
just for the whole thing.
Well, that-
How
that-
many people, you know, and you got other you know, the whole use of that courtyard, this house, we can't see where I'm looking at, pointing with my finger, but it, I mean, it's facing right into that courtyard. Is that a good because it's not a face of a building? Or does it mean there's gonna be a whole bunch of activity there, that is in their face all the time?
Well, and I guess sort of related to that, and maybe a double-edged sword, how accessible will that play area be to the community beyond this building?
It's intended to only be used by the residents.
Okay.
So I think as, one of the priorities in doing 40B is being family-friendly and including areas, you know, for play areas or other areas for families to congregate. It is, you know, slightly sunken on Prescott Street, and it will be sort of fenced off. You can see the buffer along Prescott Street there. So
Yeah,
I'm
I don't
not
know.
sure how-
I don't
It's not
know.
a huge play area. There'll be
Yeah,
some kids
right.
playing in there.
And it might be perceived positively by that abutter. Or negatively, I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
sort of asking that question
But that's why I
is
was
that something
also
that can
asking
be
about
discussed and,
who gets to use it.
Certainly better than in the back of the building,
yeah, but
in the
what,
courtyard.
but there's the other courtyard on the other side too.
Well, but I think that's, it looks like that's emergency access. Am I wrong about that? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so there's access for fire truck to come in and pull around there versus having structures that are placed there. You know, I think that the proximity of the play area to the building itself and units that'll be on the first floor of that building that are pretty close by are gonna sort of help regulate how much disturbance there would be coming from that area as part of, you know, having a functional building and keeping those people happy as much as anything. It could be moved around. It could be, you know, further in the interior of the second building. But I feel like it's more open. It feels more open where we've put it now, rather than sort of sticking it in the back of the site.
Yep. I'm not trying to make a judgment about it. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that could be an area that,
You're noticing it. Right,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's a thing that is worth, and I think it is worth getting community input, right? Because
Right.
those are the abutters that we would want to think about it. All right, any other questions for Mr. Gamble? All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gamble.
Thank you.
All right, I am going to get the list. All right. That's great, Coleman. So thank you for your patience, folks, and we are going to start opening public comment. So the first person on our list is Michael Hakeem, 55 Prescott Street.
Bless.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you please give your name and
Yes.
address for the record? I know I said it.
My name is Michael Hakim, and I'm representing my son and his family, Daniel Hakim, who reside at 55 Prescott, whose rear yard abuts this property. Daniel can certainly speak for himself and probably will. He's here. But I am helping him because, as I've said to you in the past, I spent an entire career as licensed professional landscape architect and a licensed professional planner. So I thought that I could be of value to both the board, hopefully to the developer, and certainly to my family. These are being offered as comments of what I've observed. I did get to meet with Mr. Steinberg at one point. They are not being offered as expert testimony because as a 9-year retiree, I allowed my licenses to expire. So they are observations based on a great deal of experience. I got to say, you're all very, very nice. This has been a real cordial discussion. My business was in the New York, New Jersey area. It was not like this. Much more contentious. And I'll try not to be too aggressive, but I think that there are some things that need to be said. What I've heard so far this evening is something like what Mr. Gamble alluded to. You've been nipping and tucking. You've been looking at details. You've been looking at ways of dealing with the proposal as it's been presented to you, without looking at the overall more global issues. And that's what I'd like to address. And I do want to preface my comments by saying they're based on the original plans that I had seen without any of these modifications that are most recent. So some of these have been addressed by the developer, and I appreciate that. They're making an effort. But they're making an effort, in my mind, to basically nip and tuck and not lose the overall massiveness of this development. I think this development, the overriding question here is this is tremendous overdevelopment. The density of what's being proposed is 48.3 dwelling units to the acre. That's unbelievable to me. That's a very high density, and I think it could be, I'd love to see it closer to 20 units to the acre. If you look at all the other 40B developments that have been taking place in this town, most of them, except maybe one, are less than 10 units to the acre. So how can we go 5 times that in this particular development? It just seems like it's overkill. And 40B does not require that the project solve all of the issues that North Andover has with its affordable housing obligations, only that it makes a significant contribution towards the town's obligations. So the obvious response from the developer that I would expect is that he would claim that such a reduction would make the project non-profitable, not cost-effective. And that's a fair argument, but I think that that can be verified if you request that the developer provide you with a professionally certified pro forma, which is what they prepare before they begin to see the costs as compared to the return. That would help you to understand how much this development could potentially be reduced. I'd like to see the number of building stories reduced from 5 to 3. Again, I'm talking much bigger reductions than you've even addressed here tonight. If this were to be accomplished, the Prescott residents would only see 2 stories. Now, it's very possible that that can't be accomplished, but maybe in the alternative is to lower the whole first floor building elevation up to close to a story. If the whole building sank deeper into the soil, then you could accomplish the same thing, have less of a visual impact on the rear of those Prescott Street homes. That might bury the first floor units in the back of the building, but if you're reducing the density, those would be the units that would go.
Can we wrap up?
Yeah, okay, I'll try to be quick.
All right,
This is the architecture comments. They've addressed my comment about the northwest wing and the garage corner coming too close to the property line. That's good. And I'm imagining that the egress from the garage probably goes through Building 1 to the courtyard. I had mentioned that as a suggestion to Mr. Steinberg. And the landscaping, they're doing what they can with the dimension that they have with the landscaping at that corner. I do think the northern facade, building facade, needs to be more residential in character. And it could also be more dark colors to visually subdue it. Those are really the overriding development, planning, and architecture comments. In terms of landscape architecture, I don't know where they showed us a detail of the fence, but I don't know where it runs. They haven't shown us its actual location. I believe the northern boundary fence, which goes behind the properties on Prescott Street, should be tall, it should be solid and opaque, just to prevent passage by trespassers. Believe it or not, that goes on today. Anyone whose desire is to, their destination is up Prescott Street, can cut through and do cut through the rear yards and the properties of those western end of Prescott Street properties. So I'd like to see that done, and I really like to see that fence shown, located in the northeast end of the northern property line on the development side of that existing woodland that's being preserved, rather than all the way up at the property line. That would prevent people from going in and disturbing the woodlands, and would allow them to develop more fully. And I believe that the northern boundary landscaping should include major evergreen trees. I've seen that on graphically tonight, but not just pine trees. Pines thin out tremendously as they mature. And other native plants that would be appropriate here certainly would be spruce, both Norway and Colorado spruce, and potentially hemlock if it's moist enough. If it's too dry, that probably wouldn't work. And they should be planted densely. Those are my, I'll stop there. Hopefully they can be addressed by the developer, and you can enter into a conversation with them about all of them.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Ms. Sarni, and I would like to request that as much as possible, we stick to the 5-minute limit, please.
I would like to ask her some questions, so would that
We
count?
can do
No,
that
that
for the
won't.
5.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, my name is Kelly Sarni. I live at 39 Prescott Street. I am just going to start this by, I wrote this before I saw all this today, but I want to read what I wrote beforehand. This may seem trivial, but we don't understand how this project can be considered 0 Prescott Street when there's no driveway or entrance on Prescott Street. Before Avalon East was built, RCG had tried to get the parking lot roadway to be considered a street, and that was turned down. Since RCG likes mutual shared parking, we question if the parking garage could actually be moved to the West Mill campus behind 50 High Street, where there's a current parking lot located. It wouldn't affect any residences back there. This would allow more space in the project area and allow only parking for the residents of this new development. We are concerned about radon gas, as the project is so close to our property line. The building of this new development will disrupt the soil. We currently have a radon mitigation in place. Is East Mill Housing going to pay for remediation if our levels get higher from this development? It certainly should not be our responsibility, as we didn't disrupt the soil. As for the peer review, we do have some concerns. First, the review states had a picture of 311 Arsenal Street in Watertown as an urban development. Watertown's a city. The last time we checked, North Andover is a town. The fact that the review states wings and campuses implies that the building is more of a college, university, or hospital design. The setbacks with outdoor terrace closest to our property, we are strongly against. That puts a direct view into our second floor bedrooms. We should have ample enough green space to not invade our privacy this much. The review states mature trees. Please come and look, as you will find most are dead and leaning on each other, especially on our side of our property. The review brings up solar panels. At the beginning of this hearing, Mr. Steinberg stated that they were not going to install solar panels, but have the setup for it for future installation. Given this project is taller than our house, we have concerns about melting of our siding or worse, start a fire at our house due to proximity. What they show up there only shows our old one-car garage. It does not have our new addition with a garage that's located on our spot. Our town has had brush fires recently. As a new development, we anticipate sprinkler systems being installed. However, that does not take Mother Nature wind conditions into effect. Will the parking garage have sprinklers in case of a car fire? If you look out our family room, we have a direct view of the bright lights from the Avalon East building shining in. Now, granted, the new building will block that, but then we will have lights closer and even more brighter near us, especially with the parking garage, as we assume that will need to be well lit for safety. We know something will be built, but we request the size of the building to be smaller in both the number of units and height of the building. East Mill Housing states this is 300 units with 400 parking spots on 6 acres, but let's be truthful, it is 300 units with 400 parking spots on 2.11 acres. This is a high urban setting. This building needs to be set back from our property line, especially since the trees will be gone. We will have direct unobstructed view. We do not need to make up the 10% in this one project. We appreciate that it sounds like the ZBA members have a good understanding of the sheer size and proximity of this project to our house, which seems out of line with our small residential lot. If members are not familiar with this location, we encourage board members to physically view where the current parking garage wall is from our property line. We do not know the exact distance, but it is close. We give permission to walk on our grass if you brave the mud, or driveway for a better look. Lastly, we know a response to the traffic is pending, especially at Elm High and Water Streets. We know the number of accidents may seem low, but the number of near misses is quite high. That intersection needs a flashing light or a flashing stop signs as cars continue to ignore the stop signs. Thank you for letting us voice our concerns, and I just had a couple of questions, if possible.
Sure.
Okay.
Address them to me.
Yes. My husband and I just would like an explanation of the downtown overlay district, sub-district A area, which was rezoned in 2014, 2015. We think that being part of the historic mill area, it would need to look more appropriate to that time, especially in regards to the nearby residences that are like on Walker Road and on High Street. And then I just wanted to clarify.
I just want to make sure I understand your question correctly. So you're asking, why does the downtown overlay district not have similar aesthetic requirements to the historic district, or?
Yeah, where it's listed as sub-district A, historic, we're just a little confused on that. No offense, but.
So thankfully, we have Andrew Shapiro here, who's our what is your title? What do we call it?
It's a long and obnoxious title. Director of Community and Economic Development. But unfortunately, I don't know that I'd be able to give an adequate answer at this time on that issue.
But
but
maybe
I'm
it's
happy
something that we
to-
can bring to the next meeting?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I just didn't know, because I saw it mentioned in some waivers and things, so we just
Yeah.
want to educate ourselves, and no offense, going on the town's website, I'm getting myself more confused.
And look, the fact that our Director of Development does not know the answer to this question offhand means that it is not an obvious answer.
Okay.
Right? And so it's a completely reasonable question to
Okay.
ask. So yes.
I appreciate that. And I just wanted to clarify, when I had asked about seeing the town's responses, I was actually referring to the responses that the town was asked to send in last summer after they received the notification of the project.
Okay.
I understand more will come later, but we
Yeah.
were just curious because the permit only gives a the state only gives a summary of what the comments were. We were just curious if that's possible to
Yeah.
see.
Well, I know we're pending some comments from you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so Mr. Shapiro, because he's not on mic, I'll repeat for the record. So it sounds like we have a copy of those records and that we can put them on the website. And so
Oh, that would be great.
We will do that.
I
So thank you
appreciate
for that suggestion, because yes, I think when we talked about it previously, we thought about it in terms of the comments that folks are giving to us now. Right? And we weren't putting those on the website either, and so we wanted to do that, but thank you for this clarification. We will
Okay.
also put those up on there. 'Cause,
Okay.
Yes, no reason not to.
And I know you are seeking community input based off of some of the designs that
Yes.
saw today, and texting my husband, sorry. We would probably prefer the bead design
Okay.
if it was really only like 2 or 3 stories from our view,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
So, I mean, I think.
In height.
Right.
That's
so my,
what we're
my
talking about.
understanding of the trade-offs here.
Okay.
And I'll ask the applicant to clarify this.
Okay.
But my understanding of the trade-offs here is that the sloped roof means that you don't have the step backs in the same way as like hard levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that instead you have a sloped roof that covers that area.
Okay.
And so the trade-off is that you get something that looks more colonial, but it also is, in my view, from the pictures that I saw, a bigger looking structure.
So it's the
Yeah,
same
that's
height.
what my husband had said as well,
Right. And
so.
and so that's the, in terms of the actual capacity and in terms of the livable floor space for inside the building, it's probably coming out to about the same. But in terms of like, to my eye, the colonial looking one, the option B, looks a little bit bigger. And that the one with the more terrace step backs looks a little smaller, but it's a more modernist looking design. And so that my question for you and for all of the audience here is, if forced to choose between those two trade-offs, how do you lean?
I don't think, I can't speak for my husband on this
No, no,
part yet,
sure.
but
Only for
I
you.
can, I
You're
can
here.
speak for myself.
Yeah.
I would prefer not to have a terrace
Okay.
overlooking me
Yep.
as opposed to the building, but I mean,
Okay.
if we could knock a level off or two, then I don't think, even if you had that design, it would look that bad.
Well, it also doesn't have to be a terrace, It was suggested that it could be a terrace that the residents could use, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be a
Oh,
rooftop.
okay.
That's something we're
That
talking
is a
about.
discussion to be had, right?
Okay.
The flip side is that if it is a terrace, you could also have a garden there, and then it might not look so terrible, right? And so like all of this is trade-offs,
no
but
way to
that's
regulate that.
right. There's no way to regulate that, and that's at the whim of whoever lives there. So,
Exactly.
Right.
And it's
so
just,
all of these are trade-offs. But
Yep.
I hear you that you would prefer option B, and
Yep.
so that I am noting that for the record because
I will make sure my
Option B.
husband sends you
No
his
terraces.
version. And this is just a suggestion, which I will address to you, Chair, but it is for Mr. Steinberg. If the wing that is closest to our property line, if it can actually turn and face down towards Prescott, as opposed to going up towards our property line. Does that make, am I
I
explaining
understand
that?
what you're saying. Yes, there's like a block, right?
The end
It
right
kind
at
of
Prescott.
cuts back up.
Yeah.
The only reason is we feel like we're then kind of like encapsulated by this building.
Hmm.
That was just a thought,
Okay.
and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right.
We didn't get, from the first person who spoke, an option A or B.
No,
Do we
because
wanna-
he was not actually a resident.
Yeah.
He was speaking for his son who is here. So
Right.
We can get his vote, but
Just saying, maybe we extend it to, so that they can have a way in there.
all right. Jim Holland, 43 Mount Vernon Street. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Chair Jim Holland, 43 Mount Vernon Street. Chair Liz, Vice Chair Peg Coleman, members of the committee, thank you very much for the time tonight. I have deep concerns about the development as proposed, and the renderings that were presented tonight are causing me more alarm actually seeing how it will look from Prescott Street. I'm concerned about the impacts of adding such a large complex on safety, health, infrastructure, and the sensitive wetland environment in the area. I sent the committee a series of photos of Prescott Street earlier today to help illustrate my safety and infrastructure concerns. I'd like to ask if those could get added to the record.
Yep.
I'll take it kind of one at a time, but in terms of pedestrian safety, Prescott Street and sidewalks are in severe disrepair presently, as shown in the photos I submitted. And Prescott sidewalk does not extend the entire length of the street. It requires pedestrians to walk into the street in order to get all the way over to 125 and over to the high school. So there's no way to get from High Street up to 125. As others have commented previously, during the winter, snow is not cleared from the sidewalk from High Street up to the first hydrant on Prescott Street. That's been going on for years. That results in an additional pedestrian barrier. Traffic has become much busier in Prescott Street in recent years, in part due to the expansions already that have happened nearby at the East and West Mill and Avalon apartments. Speeding is a big problem on the street, and there are not even any speed limit signs to let people know what the speed limit is. The situation for pedestrians on Prescott Street is really hazardous today. I'm very concerned about what the impact will be of adding approximately 300 units, 400 more vehicles, and other drivers like deliveries, food orders, et cetera, to our area. The second topic is concerns about health impacts of the demolition and building. In terms of the construction itself, I'm very concerned with the impact to air quality and environmental contamination that the proposed demolition and building could have in our neighborhood. The site is very near and could be above a former industrial site with the associated risks in construction. People do not want building contaminants on their lawn or in their houses. Got two more topics. Infrastructure. Aside from the sidewalk problems, Prescott Street itself is in terrible disrepair, and I showed those pictures to you earlier. During the most recent apartment building projects, heavy trucks used Prescott Street to transport materials to the construction sites, causing further wear and tear on the street. I'm a little disappointed that the developer is not considering assisting with repair to that street while presenting it in such a pristine fashion overhead. The street's already in bad condition and cannot support additional traffic of this type. Then finally, on environmental, I'm also very concerned about further disturbing the wetland habitat located near the East Mill. The area was already disturbed by the placement of a large apartment building along the water. A further large construction project located on a hill above the wetland area will cause disturbance and potential runoff. The wetland area is home to a diverse mix of birds, including cranes and other animals. People in our neighborhood enjoy this area because of its nature and beauty. And then in summary, I just have a few requests for further independent assessments of some of these items. I listed them in the written material I submitted to the board, but kind of the one really major one is to look at the pedestrian situation on Prescott Street. It is really dangerous today, and I think this project is going to make it a lot more dangerous. And I just have two questions for the board, if I could. I have 1 minute, I think. Has the board asked for a smaller footprint for this project?
We have not explicitly done so.
Okay.
But, this has been a common theme from public comment, and one that I intend to bring to the applicant following this session, just to at least have that discussion and talk about what in concrete terms.
I appreciate that, Chair Lewis.
Yeah.
What is the financial break even for a project like this, or for this particular project? How many units combined housing would they need to break even on this?
So I don't have a number there, and
Okay.
but that's I think part of the discussion. And I think Mr. Hakeem was saying something similar about pro forma and like understanding the math a little bit of what we're dealing with here. I think that can be helpful.
I would second that, because we're hearing a lot of discussion about having to make the project viable, and I'd like to know how much room there is in profit, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would help to have an audited look at that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, that is the list that I have here. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward and talk? All right. Mr. Steinberg, Mr. Bradford, got a bunch of things here that I would love to talk about. I think the first one, to continue what we were just discussing, is that, the financial viability, right? And we talked earlier about how this is often a tightrope, but I think it is worthwhile for the community to have specific numbers to attach to that. Is that something that we can do in more concrete terms?
Well, I think it should be noted, because the public's probably not aware, it is regulated. We will be audited.
Yeah.
The profitability is capped by the state, and if that's the right way to put it. So we have to prove that it's not, a windfall to the developer. I think these projects are really challenging. So it was basically designed to be like this sort of economically feasible, but not too economically advantageous to not qualify anymore, right? So
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about reduction in units, which I think is the big picture question, it's like there has to be some offsetting, that the costs that are saved in the areas that those reductions are made, that we're finding efficiencies in our project.
Yeah.
It's basically the way we look at it, and I think our intent after getting all the peer reviews in, which we're just about there, and having design meetings, is to say, can we look at everything that we can resolve all these questions into a design, and what would that mean for unit counts, and could we reduce the size in certain ways and still keep it feasible? I couldn't answer that question in a unit
Right, obviously,
way now. But
obviously you can't give me an answer
Yeah.
now, right? And I don't expect one, especially because we just asked for a whole bunch of changes, right? But, and all those changes are cost money. But I do think that it is, I think, challenging for the public to accept the answer of, no, we can't shrink it, when they don't see some math in front of them. And so I think at some point in this process, it would be good for us to have that discussion. And to your point, we will, we're going to have a follow-up in 2 weeks that will talk about some of the traffic and stormwater and civil, and also some of the feedback from town boards. And then we will have, we still need to have the water sewer discussion, which is taking a bit longer because of some of the requirements from the town. Following that, we will probably then start to have, serious on-ramping towards a final decision. And I think in that process, it probably makes sense to start laying out those financials and what boundaries we have for it. So I think that aligns with what you were just saying, but I just want to set the public's expectation that that's probably the timeline that we'd be looking at for something like that. Does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. Steinberg?
Yep.
Okay.
that's fine.
So I think that, that covers a big piece of things. I think one thing that Ms. Sarni mentioned that I do want to, that was sort of glossed over a little bit when the landscape architect was talking about lighting, is that, there's some revisions to that plan that was put in there that are going to be discussed. But how do we think about lighting exposure? We very briefly had that picture. I have to admit that I am not enough of an expert to really understand that picture as it stands on its own and what that means for light projection. And so I guess my question is, what should the expectation be for the way that light is projected around the structure, in the way that it goes out towards Prescott, towards 39 Prescott, and out towards the mills? I'm assuming that the lighting is weighted heavily towards the mills because that's where the parking is and that's where the other buildings are. But maybe you can help me a little bit understand that.
Yep. Well, the standard's actually not to have any light pollution that goes off the site.
Okay.
And so that would be shielded. And so I think as a landscape. Yeah,
I see. So,
on the
okay.
adjacent properties, there wouldn't be light pollution. It doesn't mean if you're looking toward a property, you're not going to see it lit. but it's not casting light onto your property.
Okay, so the numbers that make up that thing, that is the amount of light that is supposed to be coming off of, that is supposed to be visible from the project.
Yeah, I think it's a foot candle standard. So,
Okay.
you know, it's technical. Horsley Wooden was reviewing this as part of their review, so I think it's sort of overlapping with with the revised civil drawings.
Yeah.
With that, and I think, as Natalie mentioned, there's been some technical issues for some reason with getting it perfect right around the edges of the property where they're doing this, and the intent would be, we're not asking for a waiver on any,
Lighting
light pollution, part of the zoning code, and that those, there will be a fully resolved plan that will be submitted, and you can have the peer reviewer go over it.
Okay, so the way that, so the intention then is that at the end of this, there will be no light pollution that neighbors will experience.
But to be clear, and I do feel silly that I didn't think of it, is you do see the light, and of course, the parking garage would need to be lit for safety. So that would be a visual impact on the neighbors, but specifically 39. I know that, I mean, and possibly in the winter, also 55. You know, I haven't looked at it from y'all's sides, so I don't know, but.
Oh, actually, before we go any further, Mr. Holland, can I ask you back to the podium real quick for one thing? I want to ask you a very simple question. Sure. Option A, option B.
And we're going to hold you to it very intensely.
Sure.
Right.
You know, the building is a colossus, and I can't make a decision on that type of choice.
Understood.
I don't think that should be the choice. I think we should look at a third option, which is
Okay.
a smaller complex.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I had to ask, just because we are trying to poll people. So another thing that's been brought up a couple times is snow clearance along the street. To some degree, this property has been kind of derelict for a while, right? But you could understand the community's hesitation in assuming that will improve going forward. So what is the plan in terms of things like clearing snow along that Prescott Street sidewalk?
Well, I will say after Mrs. Sarni brought it up last time, we had our guys go up and clear all the snow off the sidewalks there.
I
Because
think we have a picture that shows that there was still snow there. I don't know, maybe that was taken before.
Well, it's I don't know about when the picture was taken. It was it wasn't intentional to leave it like that. There's also issues that we clear snow, the plows come and push it on the sidewalk. We clear, that happens around the site. There were other issues with where snow stockpiling was happening. We had a meeting with our snow removal people. So there's a certain condition where, right, this is the backside of the property, there's not much going on up there, and it was sort of ignored by the people on the property at the time. Going forward, certainly it would be our obligation to clear all the sidewalks in front of these buildings up to the edge of the property on Prescott Street. And I think if you, considering the amount of snow we had this winter, if you were driving down High Street at any point, our site's just about as well cleared as any place you'd find in the state during these storms and after these storms to get access into the buildings that we manage now, including clearing stuff off of High Street and moving it off of High Street. So our intent would be to treat it with the same care as the rest of the property.
Did you want to say something?
Oh, please come up to the podium.
So I do want to say thank you.
Please.
Sorry.
It's okay, I know it's so hard.
All right. Do I still need to say Kelly Sarni, 39 Prescott Street again?
No, that
You already did, so it doesn't
Okay.
matter either way.
So I do want to thank Mr. Steinberg, because after that, we did see his landscaping company remove the snow, but they stop at the caution children sign at the beginning of the woods, which abuts the parking garage. And then one of our neighbors took his snow blower and connected the path to the path that my husband did to the fire hydrant. And he did remove the snow mound behind, but then the storm that followed after that, the same things happened again. So I don't
Yeah.
know if whoever is in charge of his snow removal knows where the property line ends. That's my only question
Okay.
for that part.
And I think, I mean, it's a, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something, there is a management plan submitted as part of this that even if the property is sold in the future, travels with the property, and that can be included as a really clear, if there is a dispute or a confusion about where the responsibility ends, that can be made clear in that management plan, right? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is time? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah. Let's see. And then, I think that covers a lot of the ones that are specific to the peer review, to the discussion of today. You know, I think there was some concern, there was concern expressed about, you know, the environmental impact of the structure. You know, we've talked a lot extensively about stormwater and drainage there, so I'm not going to go too much into the runoff side of things. But in terms of things like wetland impact and soil impact, and also building materials and dust and things like that flying into the air, I'm sure that that's something that you guys have considered, so yeah, maybe you can help us a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think there's typical construction management plans that we have to put together to meet these conditions, they get pretty detailed about not having those sort of impacts, that, containing runoff during construction, containing the dust, things like that. So that would be, included in any, I don't know if it goes with this decision or it ends up coming with the building permit.
And just to be
But
clear,
there are
there's
pretty
no,
extensive requirements for the construction management.
there's no blasting needed for this, right?
I don't believe so. We're not going below the grade of the existing garage, actually, in our building. And so the point of the footprint's almost an identical footprint to what's there now, and the grading, working out the same grades that are existing. So we're trying to minimize the disturbance of, actually in this design, minimize the new disturbance of the land there.
And there's no, is there any asbestos or any other particularly hazardous materials that are in the garage currently?
No, that garage was built, I think, in '87.
Okay.
It was mostly concrete. So, it'd be impactful to take it apart.
Yeah.
Demolish it, but there'll be containment that happens with the construction process.
I think the other idea that was brought up that I was curious about is a portion of the parking garage for this project it is larger than it needs to be for this project to offset some of the parking of the rest of the community, correct? Or am I wrong about that?
The parking standards we used in this design were to exactly meet what the existing zoning requires for this project.
Okay.
And so I think David Gamble also mentioned it's a lot of parking to provide, the standard in the zoning code is a lot of parking for a project of that size. But, and that was our intent.
And
was
maybe
that
I
as a-
misunderstood
that
what the
works to
question
share.
was. Sorry.
Yeah,
Maybe
sorry.
I misunderstood what the question was from the abutters. Maybe the suggestion was to create more housing on the other sites that can be classified as shared with this to make the parking garage smaller specifically and allow the entire building then to be smaller. Is that an option that can be looked at?
That would be, I think she specifically mentioned the parking lot behind 50 High, where actually you're getting into wetland buffers and you're getting into existing infrastructure and buildings that are there, so that,
Sure.
there are probably some other places around the campus we could find parking, but I think that gets into this parking study question where we were trying to, like I said, meet the parking requirement on the site for what the site requires, and I think it's sort of a reasonable mix.
I mean, it
of that
does
on the
seem though
garage.
like this parking garage is kind of like a sticking point, right? Where it's like, it's the part that gets the closest to that pinch point. It has to take up a certain volume of space to account for the pitch of the ramps and all that stuff. So like, it does seem like that would be, and that is the only part of it that can be sort of like borrowed from another part of this
Yep.
complex.
Yeah, I think if this board comes to the conclusion that under the shared parking studies that we're doing and the parking utilization studies, there are other parts of the site where we could handle excess parking if required for this project. for sure.
But
like I
then
said,
we
we
would
haven't
be-
asked for waivers from the
Right.
parking that is required under the existing zoning for a project of this size.
Gotcha.
And I think the way to think about that, right, because something that the community has also expressed is that limited parking can result in people parking on the street, and that street is not well-built for people to park on.
True.
And so we want to be a little bit careful about putting strain on the street side parking as well.
I should mention that
It's
the
a matter of
orientation of the
risk
garage is, it's pretty, two sides are completely screened. One side sort of faces south toward the mills, is not that impactful. The other side mostly faces into heavy tree planted areas. So there, there's
Right.
the corner where it's really tight and I think
Yeah.
understandably
But
impactful. So
if you could find another place for that entire back row of parking on all floors, then that whole building is 18 feet further from the
Yep.
property line. I mean, that's an example. I'm not sure what's possible. I'm just saying, like, that's what part of why I was thinking, if there is a way without putting so much strain on like the parking situation that you get like cars lined up on both sides of Prescott all the time. I understand that you don't want to make a bad situation worse by asking too much, but that's the type of thing that I'm wondering if we can look at and see some other ideas or options to consider.
Mr. Hakeem also asked about fencing. And, I believe in the drawing actually that you see on the screen here, the fencing is specifically marked. Right?
Yeah, the fencing follows the property line around the property. It's just a good standard anyway as far as establishing where the property lines are anyway. And I think we had originally proposed just a black chain link fence because there might be some benefit to actually seeing into the green spaces that are back there. But, we could certainly, and I meant to talk to the Sarnies too, whatever people want along the property line, we can probably work out. That wouldn't be a budget buster, what the type of fence is.
Right, so
those
that's
different
what I was
areas.
going to say is, maybe it's worth seeing what is preferred in terms of opacity, right? Because that was a point that was specifically made. And so, and then, it was asked, can we set back the fences from the property line a bit? I think what you just said there is that you would prefer to actually have it mark the property line, and that's probably a useful function for it as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any concern about like maintaining the fence that's so far back into the woods that, management company wouldn't be paying attention if a tree fell on it or something like that?
Well, if it's abutting a neighbor's property, we'd probably hear about it at the very least. If something happened back there, it is a little challenging, right, to weave it in to there, but it's also, as the owner of the land, you get some liability for whatever happens back there, so we'd feel, even better making it more secure back there anyway. So I think the maintenance would become just part of what they have to deal with.
And there's also some feedback specific to the kinds of trees. And my vice chair here is much more of a tree expert than I am.
I will say, densely packing a ton of tall spruce trees and things like that, they don't tend to stay healthy for very long. But pine trees do shade themselves out, which was, I think the landscape architect actually did address like having a mixed grouping where you don't just have one type of tree all in a row, because a screen row of pines will give no screening at all in 20 years. They'll shade out the bottoms and you'll see everything. So having that like mixed, I don't know if she's still in the call, but I believe that's what she was indicating, is that it would be like, and I don't think it was just pines. I think she talked about green giant, arborvitae, and some other, evergreen, green giant, emerald green arborvitae, other evergreen trees. I don't think, spruces are more attractive than white pines, but they ultimately don't like being packed in together. I've done a lot of disease treatments on spruces that are packed in together. So, you get a trade-off of, how continuous your screening can be versus how mixed it can be. I don't think it's a bad idea. And we didn't see any specific landscape renderings about like what the grouping would look like. It was sort of like generic tree plugged into the design, but yeah, that was my take on the ideas.
And there was also a question about solar panels. Now, my very amateur understanding of solar panels is that typically you want them to face south. And so I think your initial plan was that you don't have immediate plans to put solar panels there, but that, in terms, there are obviously options after this that you could build them. But I would assume that they would be on, at least facing southward from the roof.
Yeah, I think that's logical. I think it's a requirement of the building code now to make it solar ready, so, and we do intend to do that. But yeah, logically, we'd be running them sort of where they are in the buildings now. You see them all oriented south to catch the maximum sun rays. So it wouldn't, I don't think they'd be positioned to be reflecting to the north.
Yeah.
And affecting the neighbors there in a negative way.
But they would be on the roof. They'd be up high.
Yeah, they'd be on the roof.
And I know we talked about it at one point, but, snow piling, taking up parking spots, I was gonna bring it up when we go back to everything, but have you looked into that at all, or?
Yeah, we have in our operations maintenance plan that the civil engineer submitted with those drawings, we had areas, I think, that were designated for snow stockpiling. I think, you have winters like this winter becomes very challenging, and then it's, eventually has to be trucked off-site when you run out of space eventually. And this year, there was certainly some temporary piles in places we weren't supposed to have them while they were scrambling to figure out what to do with all the snow. But that is a requirement that's been provided in the O&M plan.
Okay.
Dump it right in the pond?
Definitely can't do that.
Oh, Frank.
All right, any other comments or questions? Ms. Jacobs, Ms. Rutherford, you've been very quiet tonight.
Taking it all in, taking it all in.
I don't have any at this time.
Ms. Barrett, you're raising your hand. I can see.
Right. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to address the issue of looking at the financial pro forma and how that works under the 40B regulations.
Yes, thank you.
It's not so much that the applicant has to give you a financial analysis now. They've sort of already done that. The question is, when the board has received all the information that it's going to get through the peer review process and so forth, and you decide, I'm just going to throw numbers out, this is not a proposal, instead of, we want to cut the project back by dropping it down a story. That loses some number of units, and the applicant then says, I can do that, or the applicant says, that's going to make my project uneconomic. That's at the point where the board can say, you need to prove it to us by giving us a pro forma that shows the impact of that loss. So you just have to think about the timing of this in the course of the hearing process. When is it that the board is going to have, some discussion about the changes that you want to see in the project, so the applicant has an opportunity to come back and say, and just demonstrate what the financial impact of that is, and whether the board is going to accept that financial analysis.
Okay. All right.
Just it's a timing issue, Mike.
Yeah. No, that's
Can I
very
ask
helpful.
a question then? Is that something that could happen in small chunks throughout? Like, if we change this one part, what would that look like financially, or is it best to do that kind of all at once?
I think you need to sort of make some decisions about things that are likely to have a significant enough impact that it's worth it for everybody to be talking about a revised pro forma. I don't think you want to do it too piecemeal. I don't know if that gets anybody anywhere. I think you really have to decide based on all the input you get. Are you content with 296 units in the configuration that's proposed? Or do you want to tell the applicant you're just not comfortable with that and you want to see some other changes that are likely to have an economic impact? And that's at the point where the applicant comes in and says, I can't do that. And here's the proof, and submits a pro forma for your review.
So Judy, I'm thinking off the cuff here, but we're in a public meeting, so I might as well have the deliberation here. What I would think is probably an appropriate timing would be, so we have, like I said, we're going to have a follow-up in 2 weeks, and then we're going to have the water sewer And then we're likely to have then another follow-up afterwards that will include water, sewer, and architecture.
Yep.
And I think probably at that time is probably worth having that deliberation. That probably fits in with the schedule. That you're nodding, so I'm assuming that that for you is a reasonable kind of timeline that you would
Yeah,
expect for this.
I think you need to have enough information as a board that you can then make a decision what it is that you think will be acceptable to the board. You know, short of closing the hearing and starting to vote and voting on conditions, it's like you're sort of doing a test of the board. What are you comfortable with? And if the board wants to see changes that are significant enough that it's likely to have a financial impact, you know, that's the opportunity for the applicant to say, I can do that, or I can't.
Yep.
And if the answer is I can't, then that's the applicant's burden to demonstrate why that's the case.
Okay.
Well, and Michael, is there a benefit to having more of that conversation earlier so that the peer reviewers and the applicant have more of a chance to incorporate? They're already doing redesigns and reevaluations for the peer reviews. Would it be good to get some of that in earlier so that that can be factored into the?
So I think what Ms. Barrett is saying is that it's a little bit complicated because
Sure.
it's, you know, it's a meaningful step to ask them to do the pro forma,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't think we can do this many times over. And
Right,
so
I agree.
from that perspective that we can't do it. What we can do is voice that, for example, the community has asked what it would take to have the numbers here, right?
Right.
And so that's something that I think the applicant should be ready to at least have an informal answer to, right?
Right, I guess I meant like as a board, would it be worth it to have a conversation more openly earlier before the
Yeah.
peer reviewers are all back about if we wanted some like more significant dimensional changes?
Yeah, well, and I think right now is kind of our opportunity to do some of that, right?
Okay.
So like, if you have opinions, this is sort of a good
Yeah.
chance to
Yeah.
I guess I'd be curious what the financial impact would be or what the options are to have like the sort of more intensive step back that you did on the corner near Prescott with like the very corner being 2 stories down and then the other parts being still like 1 story with a step back. If we did a similar thing near that parking garage corner that comes so close to the corner there, even if it cost a unit or 2, I think it would be at most a unit, what that impact would be, what that option would be, and then what that would look like. You know, having sort of like an elevation view of that backside. I don't want to, you know, I don't think it's making too much of the conversation about sort of these like 3 or 4 abutters right on Prescott to say that like they're shouldering nearly all of the community burden for a relatively large project. So I do think it would be worth it while doing redesigns. I mean, I think you took the peer review and then went a little step further with the step backs and maybe could take this part here and go even a little further there. 'Cause I do think that would be a relatively small loss for a relatively large impact to the people around them, around this part of the building.
And I do think, my expectation is when we get to this stage, that one of the things that I will ask for is sort of a very staggered version of a few different options. And I think one of them is that, right? And I think the most extreme one is going to be more like what the community's asked for, which is, you know, having the
Whole
units,
stories.
right? And I think it will then be on you to tell us where that line is along those steps of what it is that you can accept and what you can't. And then we will ask for justification for that, right? I think that's why I expect this to play out as. So, but I think it is good to voice that because I second your opinion that, you know, if I like, you know, insofar as small changes and nipping and tucking, as Mr. Hakeem described it, that of those, I like the the step back as a way to improve the visual impact quite a bit, even though it's a small change. And that if we can extend that a little bit more in that corner, I think that would be really helpful. But I also do think it's worth listening to the community who is saying, what about a bigger change? And how can we understand that impact for you in terms of your ability to make a project happen?
So,
Yes, please.
so, I guess regarding bigger change, architecturally, I sort of like this, taking aside, if it, how it impacts the neighbors, if it was just in a, versus.
It was
the-
in a desert.
Well, versus the typical podium style, construction we're seeing nowadays for multifamily. But I was wondering if you did look at the podium style to see if you'd reduce the massing on that, it would, draw the footprint in perhaps, but might have an effect on height. But if you could draw the footprint in, you might be able to move it away from the street and from the 39 Prescott a bit more. So I didn't know if you had looked at that or considered that. And
Yeah, we actually looked at that, one of the first things we looked at was this comparison between doing the multi-story garage and the podium style, because the podium style adds to the height, right? Because now you're putting all the parking underneath the building.
yeah,
And.
unless you put it,
and you're-
unless it's a below grade
yeah.
podium,
Well, and then, right, but then
that adds cost.
that's a pretty costly form of construction.
Right.
And including those issues of ventilation and land disturbance and other
Water.
things there. Yeah, so I mean, I think
But,
we.
so comparing it to a podium at grade, and right, it makes it taller, but would the footprint shrink, and can you position it in a better position because of that?
I think the best way to describe sort of what we were thinking about the footprint is the existing garage is sort of the basic footprint we were thinking of. So to replace that many, there's 600 spaces in the garage on 2 levels now. So to get the same number of parking spaces is actually beyond the footprint.
Right,
So
but
we
you're
have
looking for 400.
397 in our garage now, and 300, call it, on the first level of the garage. And so by stacking them, we're actually able to reduce the footprint of the garage and its impact there, while also achieving more convenience for where people come in out of the garage, more convenience for the open air. So.
And this is David Gamble. If I may just chime in real quickly, just to give you an order of magnitude, a car parked on a gravel lot or even on asphalt is, let's say, $3,000 to $5,000 per space. If that car goes into a garage, it's actually $25,000 to $35,000 a space. So a factor of, what is that? Almost 10. You put that below grade, it's 3 times that expensive. It can be $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a space, which is absolutely cost prohibitive, even in urban areas. So getting them in a garage is actually a pretty good first step. And having the surface spaces, of course, depending upon how they're screened, helps to alleviate the scale of the structure.
Yeah, no, I had mentioned below grade, but that wasn't really what I was focused on. It was more like that on-grade podium, which I think is generally cheaper than the multi-story garage. Maybe you might have pricing on it, I don't know, but from my experience.
Yeah, I think.
And that's why we're seeing them all done that way.
Yeah. Well, there's the impact on the construction type of the whole building, right? When you do the podium style. So I think we don't want to go back toward that, but I think we have a lot of feedback that's helpful. I do think. I think Mr. Hakeem brought up the question of density, and Mrs. Sarney brought up the question of the zone that it's in. We did, our first presentation was more about the context of the zone that it's in and the background of that. That might be good to review as well, and you can get people from the town to tell that story too. But a lot of the context of this building was, we could by right build buildings almost as big as this on this parcel. It was part of the master plan. It was in the underlying zoning that was approved at town meeting and codified. And
It would just have to be industrial.
No, for resident, by special permit.
Oh, okay.
By special permit.
Okay.
And those, but yes, the same, like, commercial buildings of that height would be by right.
Right.
And so, I do think there is a context that's created by the underlying zoning that is different from the neighborhood that's up the hill because of the zone it's in. And its designation as the historic mill district was more like saying it was historically mills.
Yeah.
And it was it wasn't established as a historic district. And the neighborhood conservation district that is established of Machine Shop Village doesn't include this actual parcel of these.
So the
of these
historic mill
mills.
district is more of a branding thing
It's
than a
right, it's a
restriction.
naming of a what we're talking about, what area we're talking about, the historic mill area.
Mr. Pucci, you wanted to chime in earlier.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. George Pucci again from KP Law, covering for Carolyn Murray tonight. Good to be with you tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to follow up to Judy Barra's point. And the framework that you and the vice chair were discussing is actually very much in accordance with the regulations for the pro forma.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give you the guidelines on that, and kind of, this will be the way to structure it. One thing I would caution you, if you want to get into that dialogue with them, try to do it sooner rather than later in your hearing process.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you run out the clock and you won't have the opportunity for it.
Yeah.
But and it's in the regulations at 56.05. The board may request the pro forma or other financial statements for a project only after the following preconditions have been met. Other consultant review has been completed, which you've got underway. The applicant has had an opportunity to modify its original proposal to address issues raised. The board has had an opportunity to propose conditions to mitigate the project's impacts and to consider requested waivers, which is some of the issues that you've raised. The applicant has indicated that it does not agree to the proposed conditions or waiver denials because they would render the project uneconomic. So in other words, the types of things that you're addressing with them, if they say we can't do that, it renders it uneconomic, you could get to the pro forma at that stage. And just one thing that you are clearly not doing, but you want to keep this in mind, and sometimes the public doesn't get this nuance until it's read to them. A board may not conduct a pro forma review in order to see whether a project would still be economic if the number of dwelling units were reduced, unless such reduction is justified by a valid health, safety, environmental design, open space planning, or other local concern. So in other words, you can't say, well, you've got a big project, tell us what it could be at 70 units, or if you can't just do that as a general proposition. It has to be tied to some, local
Concrete
concern
reason.
that you've got up on your board over there that I see. Yeah, so in other words, as a result of that process, that you've got peer review, they're making comments, you're digesting it, you're asking questions, and then to the extent you're taking that public input, that you raise issues of local concern, that raise the issue of, can you remove this corner, can you reduce this unit count here, then you can kind of tie it to then getting that pro forma review to justify it. So, and again, it's not black magic, it's right in the regulations, so you're free to look at that too as you go along.
So that's helpful. So just to repeat it for the sake of making sure that I'm understanding things correctly, right? So we can't just blanket ask, what about reducing it in half, right? But what we can say is, for example, there's a specific reason to the area of the community that we want to say, reduce that corner of the building that's over by Prescott down to 3 floors, right? That we think that is specifically justified given the circumstances, and then we can ask for that. And then if they can't make that happen, then we can ask for a pro forma, but we have to have backing to
Yeah, there has to be a real legitimate local concern that's justifying your requested modification of the project.
Okay.
But that's
Right.
exactly right. You can't just say, well, I'd like to know if you can do it at 30 units, or,
It makes sense that we can't ask for the line so that we can walk right up to it without any other discussion.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
that makes sense.
That's why I wanted to get this on the table now,
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, George.
And I have to compliment you, most boards I represent, you never see the pro forma issue until it's on appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee.
Right.
Because usually you don't have enough time to get into that type of dialogue back and forth about modifications you might like to see. So I think you're well on top of the game, even having that discussion now to be able to address it.
Well, I appreciate our knowledgeable community for helping us along the way as part of that discussion. So, how long?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about lead time if we're to ask you for the pro forma. And if we're thinking about our duration of when we run out of time, how long would it take you? I'm sure you've got pro formas going all the time, but
Good evening, John Smolak, attorney for the Attorney Bucci is exactly correct in terms of the requirements under the regs, 56056, which deals with these requirements in the process that you undertake to review. And it is usually done at the very end of the process. I mean, in terms of the discussion of back and forth, in terms of design, that always happens through the process. In my experience, it's unusual to get to the point where you have to do a pro forma review, because you usually are able to work out various design matters as you go through the process. But typically, actually, we wouldn't share a pro forma at this point in stage or through the middle of a hearing process. It's just too premature. And confuses things in terms of financial viability, which is really the purview of the subsidizing agency, and also under the regs, not until the end of this process. So,
And we've asked you to make changes,
right?
right?
Right.
And I want to be
Right.
aware of that those changes
Right.
will also affect your financial viability as well.
Right. And typically what happens, and at least in my experience, is that basically you would be proposing conditions that, whether they are waivers or whether they are other conditions imposed on the project that we feel would really significantly impact our project. And so that's the point where you could conduct a pro forma review, at least in my experience, my opinion. But in terms of design issues, I think certainly we should keep the dialogue going in terms of flexibility, what we can do, what we can't do. And then if we have to get to the point of a financial, a pro forma peer review, then we'll deal with it. I would suggest toward the end of the process, because we still have a fair amount of territory to cover before we finalize things. And we heard you loud and clear in terms of some of the hot button issues, and certainly we could address, I think, a lot of them. But but reducing the project by 50% or the density by 50% is a non-starter. So, and I think we all understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to address, so Mr. Killalay mentioned the timeline, right? So just for the public to understand, legally speaking, the requirement by the law is that this process is supposed to conclude within 6 months of it starting, unless there is a waiver that has been signed. The practical reality, from what I understand, is that almost every one of these ends up having some kind of waiver that's signed to extend it, that it is rarely completed within exactly 6 months. So we began on November 20th, 2025. That puts our end date as May 19th, 2026. That's coming up very soon. We are unlikely, in my opinion, to wrap up completely in that time. I'm going to start having some discussions with the applicant behind the scenes, talking about how we want to approach extending it. I think probably more or less a month at a time is probably going to be the way that we do it. That's at least my assessment, but again, I'll want to talk with the applicant and we can work something out. And so that means that it's probably sometime this month we will draw up a waiver agreement to extend it towards the end of June, because I do not think that we're going to reach it by May 19th. So I'll have the discussion offline. I look at what we have in front of us, and to conclude in May would be extremely rushed, I think.
We won't even get the parking repair review until like April, right?
Well, it's April next week.
Right. Then
Yes.
May is just
Right.
a scant
Well, and then
month
we're not
after
going to
that.
we're not going to have our water and sewer until likely the end of April.
Yeah.
Right, and so then then we would have another discussion sometime after that, probably early May, which will be a follow-up on water, sewer, and on this architecture review. And then we will start having a more formal discussion about what requests we are making as a board, and what the specific waivers that the applicant is asking for, because as we discussed earlier, I think we're going to want an itemized list of all of those and the exact numbers, right? So for like parking, for example, what's the number that we're asking for a waiver, and that's going to take some time, and so I don't see how that finishes by May 19th, and it may extend beyond the end of June. But I think putting a deadline at the end of June is is a little bit of a motivator and a little bit of a stick to help us move along this process at a reasonable pace and not waste too much time, because, you know, we don't want to delay this project unnecessarily, but we do want to give it the proper time to be able to discuss all of these things that we've been going through. So yeah, like I said, we'll discuss that offline, you know, and I'll get your guys' feedback in terms of the timeline there. But that's what I would expect, just so the public has some awareness that we have a deadline that is May 19th, but we will likely be pushing past that. All right, any other thoughts, questions from the board, from our consultants? Anything that we're missing?
Next meeting, sir?
The next meeting is going to be April 8th at 7:30 p.m. I apologize for the time change, but for one of our members to be able to attend, it needs to be a little bit later. So it'll be April 8th at 7:30, and the subject will be discussion of the replies, and we've had a couple rounds of traffic and civil and stormwater reviews. So we'll discuss those and the changes there. We will also be discussing town feedback. So I've asked for feedback from town offices and departments, and that feedback has started to trickle in. Judy Barrett is compiling that information, and so we will have a summary that we hand out shortly after the April 1st deadline, and we'll be able to pass that on. Ms. Sarni, if you want to come up to the podium. I'm afraid everything has to be on microphone, so, but please.
Is it going to be here or at the senior center?
I believe it's going to be at the senior center. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and that's just because of building availability. There was not a good time slot to be back here. I tend to prefer here, especially because it's easier for North Andover CAM. I appreciate the amount of effort that they have put in to be able to make our appearances at the senior center possible. Any other questions, thoughts?
Nope.
All right. With that, do we have a motion to continue to April 8th at 7:30 p.m.?
I'll make a motion to continue to April 8th, 7:30 p.m. at the senior center.
Second it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. Thank you very much. We are adjourned for today.
Thank you.